Are we live? Okay. Welcome to the Soman Podcast, where you get to join us on No, start over. I don't want to say that anymore. You ready? Okay, here we go. I screwed it up last time, too. Welcome to the Soman Podcast, where we, I screwed up again.
What do you call it? The what podcast?
The Soman, S-O-M-N.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Welcome to the Soman Podcast, conversations we would have had anyway. That's all I'm going to say from now on.
Killed it.
Oh, man.
Hit it.
So we had to edit out
Awesome.
the first two tries because I can't, for some reason, couldn't say that right in a row. My name is Matt Brozick. I have my sidekick, Wade Abid, and we have our super cool guest. I'm really excited about this conversation we get to have. We've prepped her a little bit, not a ton, but a little bit. We have Nancy Zallek, which you are the president CEO of the Mankato Area Foundation. Did I say that right?
You did.
Yeah,
Got it.
Right.
and she is our chief advocate for our local area nonprofits.
That would be another way to say it.
Yeah.
I
There we
like
go.
it.
Yep.
Now, Wade, we usually thank a few people or things. What do we do to do that?
I'd like to thank
Bolton and Mink
at
Studios.
Bolton Mink Studios on the gram. I want to thank Pelican Coolers. I want to thank the Wax Bat Winery and MAF. And I think that's it.
Nice.
I think that covers everybody, right?
Yeah, I think
So-
we did everything.
Yeah, like the Mankato Area Foundation, Google that. So big shout out to them. Thanks to Nancy. And we're going to get going, I think.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about nonprofits, philanthropy, and building our community, and then see where that conversation goes.
I think so. So, Nancy, what we usually do is we start with really just a background. There's some people that know who you are, maybe some don't. I know you more professionally than I know you personally. And you were actually one of the first, I don't know if I ever told you this, you were one of the first calls that I made when Wade and I were talking about this.
Yeah.
Because you've done in the past, if I have an idea, if I bring it to you, you'll listen and you'll tell me if it's dumb. And so the last time I brought an idea to you, you gave me some really good feedback. And so this time I was like, hey, what do you think? How does this work? And because of that, I think I really enjoy our conversations and wanted to have you on here to learn a little bit more about you. So tell us a little bit about where you're from, who you are.
So, like you said, so Nancy Zallek, and my maiden name is Taylor.
Yep.
And so my family has actually been in this community I'm the fifth generation.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's really fun for me because in the role that I have, I mean, obviously I have a really long time connection to this community. So when you think about it, my family came here. They started Brett's Department Stores in 1868. So that was
Wow.
10 years after Minnesota became a state. So
And just to put, because I'm a history nerd, in 1868, the Civil War got done in 1865.
I know.
1861 to 1865. So this is just a few years after the Civil War.
Yeah, isn't that bizarre?
So anyway, I apologize. So
No.
that's a pretty unique history. Not many people from this area can say that they have that much of a history.
No, and it's really interesting because my great-great-grandfather, whose name was George E. Brett, who started the Brett's Department Stores, he, at the time, at least family lore, is that he had a really good buddy or a good friend, and his friend also wanted to start a department store, and his name was Dayton. And he decided that he was going to go to the Twin Cities. And so he went there, and my family stayed here. And although we're not the Daytons, I am actually incredibly grateful that this is where they decided to stay and land, because this is just a wonderful area to live. And I have never regretted that this is our home for 5 generations.
So where in Mankato did you grow up?
I actually grew up right across from Roosevelt School on
Okay.
Owatonna Street.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
West Mankato,
Yep.
my family lived. My parents lived there for like 40 years, and
Yeah.
And raised all of us there, and it was just a great. I mean, I was teasing about it today because I was talking about going to a school that close, like literally right across the street. So I would just sit there in the morning and eat my cereal and wait for the bell to ring, and then I'd go bolt across the street. I didn't have to do all that nonsense on the playground waiting. So it was pretty fun.
So what was it like growing up with, it's Mark Taylor, right? Is your brother? And he's the OB/GYN doctor who actually delivered, let's see, my daughter. Yeah, my oldest daughter. Anyway, so what was he like as a sibling?
Oh, I wish I would have had some cash for the cup. He actually, he is absolutely one of. one of my favorite people in the whole world. I have two brothers, but Mark and I are so older brother. Then Mark's in the middle, and I'm the youngest, and so he and I are 4 years apart. And he just he's hilarious. He is so much fun, and he is probably one of the nicest, kindest people I've ever known. And you know, we talk about, Wade, you mentioned earlier that there aren't many women president and CEOs, and I give my family a ton of credit for that, not only my parents, but also my siblings, because they never, even though I was the youngest and I was a girl, they never treated me like, oh, you're just the girl, or you're just you're the youngest one. You know, they always held me up as being just as cool as they were. And now it's, and in our family, believe it or not, my brother, the doctor, was kind of the black sheep of the family because he wasn't going into the family business. My older brother and I went into retail. And so, which is what you were supposed to do. And he never had an interest in that. And so weirdly, he was always like, oh, Mark, he's just the doctor. That wound up working better for him when we closed the stores. But, you know,
well, a really funny story that I don't know if I've ever shared. I don't think I've ever told you this. Like,
I don't know.
So when you're a newer parent, like, so this is my second child at this point, but you're still like this whole thing. Especially my wife, she does labor and delivery. She gets it. To me, I don't like hospitals. I don't like blood and shots and everything. So I'm just like way over my head in what's going on. And he's
even though you've had like 9 kids.
Well, now,
but
yeah,
I mean,
but this is now number
it's all
2.
Pat,
Yeah,
right.
now it doesn't bother me. But what was so funny about it is he is standing there, and I'm thinking like, okay, this kid's gonna pop out any second. And he's like, hey, you like to hunt, right? I'm like, yeah. He goes, did I ever tell you when I got hit by a duck, like right in the back of the head up in North Dakota?
So her brother, so Nancy Zallek's brother, Nancy Taylor.
Yes. So
Mark Taylor,
Dr. Taylor is now, I'm thinking like, you better concentrate because things are happening. And he's like,
nah,
oh yeah,
fine.
I'll just wait for a second. You know, you should have seen, my buddy shot this duck and I was turning around and like fell, through the sky and hit me right in the back of the head. It's like telling this story. And I'm just like, dude, pay attention to what's going on.
Yeah. There's a baby being born here.
Oh, but it was so funny. I mean, not
He's
that
like,
he
calm
wasn't-
down. All right.
Yeah. And then 20 minutes later, she was actually born. He knew what he was doing. I was freaking out. But yeah, so that was one of the things that I always remember about your brother because he told me about the dead duck flying through the air that just got shot at him in the back of the head.
Hey, we have a photographer here from the
we
Free
should talk
Press.
about
What's
that.
your name?
Pat.
So Pat from the Free Press is here. So thank you to the Free Press and a big shout out to you guys.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for covering our podcast. Appreciate you guys a lot, man. And we talked to Diana.
Yes.
Right?
I think Diana, did we get it right?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
And so Rojo Garcia, I think,
Yeah.
is her name. And we want to get her to come on this podcast. And so if you can get your editor to let her on, we want to have her on there. So big shout out to the Free Press. Love and appreciate you. And thanks for covering our small, tiny, fledgling, barely alive podcast.
We have tens of views.
So
today.
we have tens, like dozens
Tens.
maybe,
Yeah, maybe a dozen.
on a good one. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, fellas.
Really.
All right.
See you, Pat.
Thanks a
Yeah.
lot. Oh, man. Where were we even talking about now?
We're talking,
I
well,
remember.
and
I want to go back to, so you grew up in West Mankato
Yep.
by Roosevelt. My first house in Mankato was 209 West 5th Street,
real close.
okay, which is not too far. So when my boys were born and we moved down here, and like I kind of like worked at Ferris Johnson and worked my first firm job here. It was a lawyer. We lived right there in like an old English Tudor style house, and that was our playground. So like 2011, 2012, and my kids are like giant. Like I had like my kids. My son, I bought him a 10.5 size shoe yesterday.
And
So-
he's how old?
11 and a half.
Oh, wow.
He's a big kid.
He's a big kid. So Miles is a big guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so our first house, though, was a green English Tudor on West 5th, like across the street from the Y. And then like down the block, there are 2 churches on the corner.
Yep, that's right. But we're in the stone house.
Yeah.
On the corner of 6th and
Okay. So that stone house, I think, is owned by a guy like named Cheryl and Walt.
yep,
And I love that freaking house. And they added onto that house.
beautifully.
Their stuff is all top notch. And I think that was your house, right?
It was.
Okay.
It was, and
Yeah.
they have been really gracious and let us come back because I, as I've told them,
So you've seen it,
I have seen it.
Yeah.
Yes. And-
right? So
and-
is it not like awesome?
no, and they did
Okay.
they did the best. So it was always a cool house.
Yes, of course.
But you know how when some people add additions onto houses and sometimes they, that's where the addition starts.
You
or,
can't
that-
tell.
No, they did it seamlessly, and I got a tour through the whole house. And what's really cool is I went in and they have kept so many things. You know, I was a little afraid actually to go back and visit because you have this image.
No.
This is where I grew up, and
Yep.
is
Yeah.
it going to be so much different? And I walked
Oh
in,
my
I'm like,
God, so
they
you grew
still
up there,
have
okay.
they still have some of the same wallpaper
Yes.
we
Mhm.
had. But then they added this beautiful addition, and it just blends beautifully. And I came home and told my parents, oh my God, it was like visiting an old friend. It was just, so now they've had our whole family back to their house. Yeah.
That's
So that house is
amazing.
great. So that's your freaking house. Oh my God. Okay. So
I was 29. My parents lived there almost 40 years.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, did they build that, or was that
No,
there?
it was built in the 30s, I think. But
Okay.
I believe they were the second owners.
Okay.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
I've
no,
told
it's-
those guys, man, I was like, if you're going to sell this house,
I've told them the same thing.
God dang it.
I don't
shoot.
think they're going to let go anytime
No, they're
soon.
not. They're like, well, we'll let you know.
Yeah.
Bye, Wayne. And I was like, well, it's Wade, but like, whatever. No, so okay. So you have, what's your journey look like? You're the youngest and you have
Sure.
this business. And so like, how did you go through? And I think just like as a preface, and I don't want to kill your steam, but what we've seen in our 8 or 9, 10 interviews here is that people have gotten used to like running through like 20 years really fast. Is that fair?
Yep. Very fair.
They're like, I went to high school, I went here, I did it. And you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So like, give us an idea. You're 15 and then how's your next 15 years look? But take your time because we have tons of time.
Okay. So, the journey. So obviously grew up in West Mankato. So I graduated from West High School. So the other reason that house was really cool, not only was it very convenient to Roosevelt, it literally is, like 2 blocks from West High School. You just
Yeah.
go down the
the
back and
Yep.
you're there. And so, when I graduated, I went to Gustavus. So I just really stretched my wings and went 11 miles north.
So
Went to
why'd you go to Gustavus?
my
'Cause
brother.
it's a great school.
Okay.
Well, it is a great school, but Mark went there
Okay.
and loved it, and so I just felt we didn't overlap because again, he's 4 years older than he's older. Can we capture that a few times in this podcast?
So,
Yeah.
so to get the full effect for fans and everybody that's going to watch this, because we have your mom and my mom and my wife and your wife, and our wives aren't fans. But we
Actually,
have
my wife has not yet seen an episode.
four fans that we have.
She hasn't.
So how many siblings do you have? There's Nancy, there's Mark.
Right. So there's 3 of us. So my oldest brother, Scott, who's currently actually living out in Virginia, but that's very, very recent. He and I grew up with the idea. I mean, he was the oldest son. So if you think about it, 5 generations,
Yeah.
and it's always been the oldest son that's taken over the store. And so he kind of grew up sort of programmed to do that. And I don't think, I think that was a good choice. He enjoyed that on his part. And he had a master's degree from Kellogg, and he went to work for Dayton's, did all the right things. I was kind of now we have a daughter who wants to be involved, and everybody was fine with that. But I was the first female,
So where's Kellogg?
Northwestern.
Which is in Evanston, Illinois.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm from Illinois, baby.
That's
Thank
why-
you. Sorry.
That's why
Sorry.
he asked.
He
the
has a
question.
weird geographic.
I was just
thing.
being
He's got-
weird
he
about
has
it.
to say-
I grew
he
up
has to
next to
say the
Northwestern,
geog-
and so
yeah.
thank you. He went to Kellogg. We can do that safely,
There you
can't we?
go.
All
Yeah.
right.
He went to Cole College for undergrad, and then he went
Co College,
up to
huh?
Kellogg. And then, anyway, so
Which Co College is in Iowa?
it is in Iowa.
And you want to hear some other crazy stuff? This is weird. It's true. My family started Co College back when.
Really?
Swear to God.
No, it didn't.
Swear to God.
Well, that's kind of
You're like
Sisters of the
king
American Revolution, I swear to God, started Co College in Cedar
rapids.
Rapids, Iowa.
You might be the king of random knowledge.
Any
this episode.
female from my family that proves bloodline can go to Co College for free because my family on the Co side started that college
Why only females?
because it was a woman who did it, and she wanted to make sure that women were educated and that they advanced their degree in their life.
That's a cool story.
Swear to God. So
Wow.
Isn't he just an?
I'm serious. I
He
swear to
is.
God, Nancy.
He
I'm
is.
not making it up. I swear to God.
He knows my house. He knows where
This
my
is
brother.
weird.
He probably knows where you live now.
Yeah,
I mean, I bet he's
exactly.
been in that house now.
Yeah.
I've not been in that house. I don't know where
I'm
she
thinking
lives.
he's a stalker.
I'm just saying.
Are you kidding me?
You should see the research he does for the show. It's unbelievable.
I'm serious. You
The
can't
house
make
I
it up.
live in now was built in 1880, so again,
Okay.
very old.
Yeah. Does it have any bicycles holding up?
It does not.
Okay.
That's the one feature we're missing. It
All
has
right,
really cool floors, but I missed the bicycle.
So your older brother was at Coe College, which my family has lineage to.
So he went to Coe College, but my other brother
Holy
went
crap.
to Gustavus, and because he was at Gustavus when I was in high school, I was always going over, and he was an athlete, and I'd go watch him do stuff, and so that just was like,
What was
oh.
he? What did he do for sports?
He was a swimmer and a runner,
Really
Good.
not real sports.
Okay.
No, like, white guy sports.
Yeah, exactly. And so
that's
I
funny.
went there and got a business degree because I was going to run a department store,
Good.
and graduated.
Was that unusual at that point, or not? For like
No, not
not
really.
Okay.
Not,
Okay.
I mean, maybe running the department store. I mean, retail as an industry is heavily female because
Yes.
it typically, unfortunately, pays less, and it's always was considered kind of a second income, sort of like the reputation nonprofits had for a very long time, which is
Yeah.
now changing.
It is, yeah.
But for our family, I would have been one of I was the first female that wanted to help run the store, and
So if you're if you're 5 generations in, so it's so all men before that.
all men before that.
Okay.
Yep,
And then your older brother is John?
Scott,
Scott. And then, so we got Scott,
Mark, and then me.
Mark, and then Nancy.
Yep.
And so Scott was like, I'm going to go to Co, and then I'm going to do something else, or go to,
So he went to Co, and then he got his master's degree, and then he went to work for Dayton's because it was also a thing
Yeah.
in the family that they always had to go somewhere else first. They had
Before you
to
come
kind of go
back.
prove themselves somewhere else first. And so he did. So that was his route, and so then I'm now. So he was. I'm trying to think. I think he was working for Dayton's at the time. No, he was back at the store when I graduated. And so I'm thinking I've got to kind of do the same thing. I'm applying to Dayton's and whatever. And we had hired a woman who was from Dayton's who was a vice president at our store, Jane Confer. And she picked up the phone one day and called me and said, "Do you want to come work for us?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I have to go prove myself somewhere. That's the routine." She's like, "Nancy, you're breaking all the other rules." No, you don't. So I actually went and worked in one. We had a branch in Owatonna at the time, and so I went and worked there first.
Did you agree with that philosophy, like at the time, that you have to go cut your teeth someplace else before you can come back and work for the family business?
I didn't think it was a bad idea, but she did a good job of convincing me
Yeah.
that I could figure it out without doing that. And at the time, I had a boyfriend who's now my husband, and he was in the area, and so I was a little motivated by not wanting to maybe go to the cities at the time. So
first, no, how'd you meet him? And what's his name, by the way?
Mark,
Mark.
So we have 2 Marks. So
Okay, got it.
We
You
keep
had a
it
Mark
sim-
and a Mark. Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
we keep it simple. So Mark went to St. John's, but his best friend went to Gustavus, and his best friend dated one of my very good friends. And I kept hanging around with them, and I think he got tired of me being kind of hanging around. So he was like, I'm going to find her somebody to date. Poor thing, never has a date.
Let's go, Johnny's.
Yeah, exactly.
By the way, sorry, go Johnny's.
Go Johnny's. So now so anyway, he introduced me to Mark, and that's how we started dating. But so he was at St. John's, and I was at Gustavus.
Yeah, so like I've never heard of Dayton's. I had never heard of Dayton's. I'd never heard of Dayton's.
Like to right now?
No, not now, of course. But
Oh, okay.
so like being from the Chicagoland area, what we had there was Carson Perry Scott.
Which is where my dad cut his teeth.
I can't make this stuff up, okay? I'm serious.
Wow.
Just saying. So like Carson Perry Scott was a brand, and there's Marshall Fields and so on, and Macy's in Chicago. So I'd never heard of Dayton's. I came up here in 1995, and I saw my first Dayton's, and it was like, well, it's kind of like a Carson Perry Scott, or it's like a Marshall Fields and so on. And there was like a Mervyn's and this whole different like Minnesota, like department store
Brands.
right? That I'd never freaking heard of. So, so you came up in that environment, and so this is like when? Like, is this mid '90s, mid '80s?
80s.
Okay, and so from seeing that because you've seen a lot of change in that environment before you went to
Oh my
nonprofit
gosh.
work, right?
Yeah.
So I really want to talk about that because like we've talked about in other podcasts, my dad sold shoes, and this is where it's awesome because like he teases me because I'm 40 and he's not. He's like 34 or something, 35, and so I go, well, my dad worked at Kenny Shoes at the mall. And they were like, Kenny Shoes, and I'm like, yeah, my dad sold shoes. So, but there was a Carson Ferry Scott, a Marshall Fields, a Sears, a J.C. Penney, and all these like kinds of things. So I saw them kind of like at their very end, and then they kind of went down. But you're 5 generations in.
Right.
So I'd love to talk about the department store and what happened in the American landscape. If you want to go there,
No, that's fine.
and if not, that's okay too. But I think that your perspective, being a family-owned place, like you guys have seen the
Right.
the rise and fall of it, right? I mean,
No, and I even, so, growing up, I really couldn't imagine doing anything different because it was so much fun. And I just thoroughly enjoyed everything about it. And then I graduated from college. And again, retail was still on a high. And it was so much fun. And we were building branches. And so our store, we used to say it was kind of like a mini Dayton's. We carried very similar lines. We were kind of, for this landscape, we were sort of on the upper end. And we decided to anchor the malls in Owatonna, Faribault, Hutchinson, Fairmont, so that ring around Mankato, when that's what people were doing, because that's where people shopped then. They shopped closer to home, and there were all these these regional malls. Well, so come late 80s, things are still on a high, and then the shopping patterns changed, and like River Hills Mall got built in 91. And that was happening all over, where we were taking it out of the small towns and making it even more regional. So now Owatonna and Faribault and those folks are traveling to Mankato to shop because of the regional mall. So here we are sitting there with our branches in these little towns, and we're watching the fact that this trend is changing. All of a sudden, people are shopping online. I mean, not much, but I mean, we were having conversations about how do we compete in that world as we're watching the trend of. So we actually bought another, in hopes of kind of diversifying. We bought another chain of stores called the Ehlers stores, and they were also in smaller towns. And just trying not to have all our eggs in the Brett's, basket. And but that didn't work either. So anyway, as we start to watch this, and as you can imagine, Scott and I are 5th generation, and the cool thing for me about working in a family business is that my dad he was chairman of the board at the time. Scott was president. I was vice president, and we worked really well together. We are all very, very different skill sets and personalities, but it worked. And
which is rare for a family to do that.
Which is very rare, and I still think really unfortunate that the business didn't work because it was fun, and we enjoyed working with each other. But after River Hills got built, and we at the time, we hired attorneys and tried to tell the community that if you build River Hills, so the 2 malls at the time were downtown. So we had the mall that had been built instead of, the city, whether that was a good decision or not. We had a mall downtown with our main store and 100, we had about 100 employees there. And then Madison East. Those were, we were each other's competition. And so we brought in a consultant and we said, okay, if River Hills comes in, full well you're going to kill these other 2. You're going to kill the downtown and you're going to kill Madison East. So just, we get it if that's what you choose to do, but you got to do it with your eyes wide open, And, at the time, everybody wanted to believe, no, we're all going to play in the sandbox together and it'll be fine. And, it took about a year. And they killed both other malls.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to say whether that was a bad decision or a good decision for the community. But we know that on the very short term, the downtown really, really suffered.
It did for a long time.
There was, there were times when there were, felt like tumbleweeds, through the streets. I mean, there just wasn't anything down here. And then thank goodness to some developers who really took an interest in making the community come back
I think you have, not to jump in, but I'm not from here, but I live here and I'm of here and I love this place. You're from here, like 19 generations deep. And I think it's been fun to see this whole up on the hill
well, that's how it was.
thing happen.
That was on the hill.
Right? So it's like, it's like it's on the hill and then you come downtown and now there's been a shift that's been fairly consistent to come back downtown. And these people that are, urban planners and trying to create spaces or density, they get the fact that you need a downtown. So the place that you guys were before has now come back.
Oh, and I can't tell you how happy it makes me.
It's awesome. And I'm a city kid, from North Chicago. So I'm like, this is great. There's spots to go and things to do. But in the meantime, we experienced this whole kind of huge gap between we're going to go up here and develop and all this kind of stuff. And I don't know if it's like the Brennans or the Fishers or other developers that have come down to do things down here. But I think there was just kind of a misstep about how we're going to develop culture and buy things and engage our communities. And for a while, it seemed like people were building these big places.
Right.
And then Main Street made a comeback. And you're 5-6 years younger than me, but I'm saying,
I don't think we're
fair?
unique either. I think it happened in a lot
everywhere.
of communities where the downtowns suddenly were kind of old and we wanted something new, and that's when McMansions and everything was kind of big and shiny and so the decision to expand that direction made sense for what was going on at the time. But in my own personal opinion, the downtown has such charm and
it does.
And
so much more character.
Right, exactly, and it's got the history, and it's so it's really wonderful to see how vital and refreshed this whole community is back downtown. And it's not like we've killed the business on the hill. I mean, there's still a lot of really successful businesses.
COVID might, but we won't.
Right, exactly.
No, there are, and I think for to find out, because I think when we met probably 5 or 6 years ago, give or take, I didn't know your background and your family history for the area, because you can still see a sign from your family's business that I've seen many, many times, right?
Right on the side of the building.
Of course, it's painted on, and I photographed it many times because I think it's beautiful and it speaks to a time that I really miss. And so when I heard that, you're like, yeah, this is what I did. I said, this is why you're so good with people, and that you give a shit about people and you care about people and you're engaged, because you had the best training ground that you could possibly have. You couldn't get any better. I'm sure with your parents and your mom and your dad and your siblings and your grandparents, there's no way you could not be a people person and be really good at it.
Well, I hope. And my parents are a whole nother topic because they're like the coolest people in the universe. So,
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so, that was tough because, who wants your legacy? You're the fifth generation. And you're looking across at each other and going, we can't save this. It's tanking, and we know that. And we probably actually held on longer than we should have. We had 300 employees. And honest to God, you hear people say, our employees are family. And they say that, but these employees were family. I mean, they worked for us for decades.
Yeah.
One of our vice presidents started out as the elevator person, and I think partly, I hope we treated them nicely, and made them, it was a place you wanted to come work. But that was, we just kept looking at it and going, we can't close the store. What happens with all these people we care
So
about?
like what year is this? Is this late 80s, early 90s,
Early
mid 90s?
90s.
Okay.
Early 90s. When we closed the store in September of 92,
Okay.
which I know because I had my second child in October of 92.
Yeah.
So I was very, very pregnant when we
A great time for that.
Yeah, when we closed the store. So, so that it was a very difficult decision. It's one, but I mean, it's one I've thought of many times and went, I miss retail when it was fun.
Yeah.
I would go back to it in a heartbeat when it was fun.
Yeah.
But we watched it be really tough. And oh my God, I can't imagine what it would, and then you watch, the shift to online shopping, and then now with COVID, and I mean, I can't imagine what people who are in retail, how they're trying to get by now.
So explain when you talk about when it was fun. Like paint a picture. What do you mean?
Well, back when, if we had probably a handful of sales a year. So you had our big one was the 12-hour sale. So you'd have a 12-hour sale, and we'd have people lined up. Crazy days. There are pictures of people lined up around the building to get into our store on crazy days.
Yes.
And I mean, you weren't begging, you weren't discounting, you weren't, just the way that you have to now. But then it became, well, we can go overseas, and we can, you got the big boxes, and we can go overseas, and we can buy this cheaper, and we can mark it up, and then we can mark it down, and then you can feel like you got a really good deal. And
So there's an office here in town that I go to for I won't say which one it is, but there's a book of Mankato's history, and Crazy Days is in that book.
yeah.
And it's in black and white, and it's a great book, and it's on sale, and it's like Mankato's last 150 years, and your family's Crazy Days sale is on there, and you can see, I think it's down Broad, maybe, down Riverfront.
It'd be, Front Street.
Yeah,
It
Front
would-
Street. Thank you, Front Street.
When we had a Front Street.
So this is back then, and this place is frickin' packed. There's people lined up, and they all look good. They got hats on and coats and dresses.
No, that's
And
really
so that was that sale, and so it's like I think it's my dentist office, by the way, but that actually happened. There's photographs of this happening
Right.
before it went to whatever it is now.
And we were, our store was very high service, and we knew our customers, and we had relationships with our customers. And, so that's what I mean by it was fun. Like you looked forward to going to work because you could come up with creative ideas, and they worked, and it wasn't just beating your head against a wall, as I think it had became after that, because the competitiveness of having to buy it as cheap as you could, so you could mark it up and mark it down 50%, and that just wasn't how we'd ever done business. And we tried it, and we did that for a while, but that wasn't fun, and it didn't have the same appeal. But and there were other times, they talk about in the Depression that the store got down to, I think one of my relatives cashed in a life insurance policy so that they could keep the store going,
Right.
And so that's going on in your head, and you're like, God, this is what my ancestors did to keep this going, and now, we're looking at it and going, we can't keep it going. But so we made we made that difficult decision and closed it in 92. And then, like I said, I was 8.5 months pregnant with my second child. And so I just needed to kind of regroup for a little bit because I'd never envisioned myself as anything else. That was my identity,
So was that was one of the questions that I had as I was thinking about this.
Yeah,
is
same.
that kind of an identity crisis at that point? Like, what in the world am I even supposed to do at this point?
A little bit.
I can envision that being that way.
Yeah, that I had spent, I'd grown up working there. I'd gone to school to work there.
Yeah.
We put on fashion shows, and, that was kind of my identity,
For sure.
and was involved in the community because of my relationship with the store. And so then you're wondering about all those things, like, not only now you just lost a job, but you're like, well, what's my identity and what am I going to do moving forward? And will anybody care about who I am or what my opinion is if I'm not associated with the store anymore? How do I become a part of this universe as not a retail person? You know? So yeah, you're kind of going through all of that. And so at the time I just said, I got to think about this a little bit. And I really like being a mom. And so I'm just going to do that for a little while. And I did, and absolutely thoroughly enjoyed the time I got to spend at home with my kids.
And how many kids do you have?
3.
3, and their names are?
So because we duplicate a lot. So my oldest is Taylor.
Okay.
So if you think back,
So Nancy Taylor had a Taylor. Got it. Okay.
But if you think back, I wasn't an original because the store was started by George E. Brett.
Yep.
And then at one point, the daughter married a Taylor. And so to keep the name in the family, she named her son Brett.
Gotcha.
So my grandfather was Brett Taylor Sr. and my dad is Brett Taylor. So I kind of stole that concept by taking the Taylor as my son's first name. So my oldest was
It's like an homage, right?
Right. So my oldest is Taylor. Now you guys are going to laugh. So then, and then my daughter's Bailey, completely original. She gets, and then my
I
youngest.
thought her name was going to be Mark.
No, but
like
then my youngest is
Her name
Brett.
is Marky.
Okay, the youngest is Brett. Okay. So
And
is she
my-
kind of the black sheep of the family? Like, just, she doesn't have like a name that is
like
associated
Bailey.
with it,
Yeah.
She's,
No, but she is an original also, so
Right, well, then
that it works for
that
her.
fits it.
But we also have my mom is Gretchen and my brother Mark has a Gretchen.
Yes.
If we saw something, we just went with it.
Yes.
If there was something that worked.
No, it's awesome.
Yep, that
I
is really
think,
cool.
But
it's great. I don't.
We're not poking fun at you.
But a big part of it, there's actually been a Brett every generation. And so my youngest was the last option for that. But we thought, it's not like having another Brett Taylor. It's Brett Zallek.
Yeah.
So, and it works for him very well.
That's really cool, though, that you have that tie around the entire lineage of the family. I think that's really cool.
And,
Same for
and
my
a
family.
Yeah,
We
and
got
big
wave
part of it is
one,
because
wave two.
we like them. So,
Yeah.
I want to do that. But anyway,
So you were
Stay-at-home mom.
Stay-at-home mom, and that
so
was
90
diapers and
92-ish.
All the stuff.
92-ish,
Have the second kid, which is
Bailey.
Bailey. And then,
then Brett came along.
And then Brett, yep,
so then from 92 to when? Was it-
2001.
Okay, so you got about 10
About 10
years there.
that I stayed home.
Wow.
But I volunteered a ton,
Yep.
and my kids were real active in school, and so I got real active in school, and I've told so many people that when I actually wound up interviewing for this job, I had another job before that, but when I actually wound up interviewing for my job at the foundation, I drew on so much of my experience as a volunteer and the things I had done and the events that I had planned and the fundraising that I had done and
Yep.
you can add to your resume and get so much experience through volunteering. And so I kind of capitalized on that. And what's great about it is that you can kind of pick and choose. Like I'm home with the kids, so I can agree to do things that are at night when Mark is home, or that I can take them with me, or so you can kind of make it work for your life. And again, thoroughly enjoyed that.
So at what, tell me a little bit about your mindset when you're like, you know what? I really enjoyed that chapter of the store. Now my kids. Tell me a little bit about the transition. What made you kind of say, you know what? I'm going to do something a little bit different now. Because you went from at-home mom to the ballet.
Actually, the ballet. Yep.
I stalked you on LinkedIn.
Yep.
Because it was like executive. It was like executive to selling the family business, and then kids, and then the ballet, and then.
So what happened there is that I actually danced all through my younger years and through college. And so my daughter Bailey was Mark took her to a Nutcracker, and that was all of it took. And she decided that she wanted to be a ballerina.
Yeah.
And so signed her up, and I'm sitting there one day, and all of a sudden I was reading something. They were struggling, and it had always been all volunteer run, and they decided that they wanted to hire an executive director. They needed somebody to kind of herd the cats and try to figure out if they could make this thing work. So I was approached by one of the board members, and they said, we have $15,000, Nancy. We can pay you. 'Cause we have $15,000 in the bank, and we can either make it work or we can't, or it's going to go away.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and I was kind of
No
like,
pressure.
no pressure, right? But I was sort of like, I love this organization. My daughter's enjoying it. I participated in this when I was a kid. I know what it can mean, and I could sit and look at it and go, I could use my business degree, my marketing degree, my, all the things that I used.
Retail executive experience
Exactly.
and so on.
I could,
Interpersonal communication skills, all of those things.
all of those things. I think I could really use those to my advantage in this little small nonprofit. And, so I thought, well, what do I got to lose at this point,
Right.
So, so I signed on for that, and it was part-time, for that whopping salary. And, but that also worked because I could do a lot of it from my home, flexible with the kids, so I thought, let's just give this a try. And I had an absolute ball. But
And this is like early 2000, 2001,
2001,
2002, 2003 in there.
I did for 5 years, 2000 to 2005.
Okay.
And so I did. I got to use all those things. So like, no one knows about us. How can we market it? No, the communication to the parents. We need to improve on that. So all of those things that are involved in running a small business, I could put into work. And so and we had success. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
And when I started out, I think we had 50 some kids, and I think when I left there, we had 140.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Which is
so we had
tremendous growth.
so we put it in the black, and kids were having fun, and the performances were going well, and it was really cool. But I learned nonprofit work on the job. I mean, I think back now of things that, I had no idea, and I was just figuring it out as I went along.
But you grew up dancing, right?
Right.
And
So that
Did you do like what kind of dancing? And is it ballet, jazz, tap, and so on?
all of the above. But I had a pretty strong ballet background.
Okay.
And so that whole piece and performances and that whole piece made sense to me.
But the business side's something different.
Well, suddenly I've got a board of directors.
Yeah.
I've got, bylaws. I remember sitting down at one meeting and somebody said something about, we need to look at the bylaws. And I was like,
What the hell is
me?
that?
What's a bylaw? Yeah.
So like you're like VP at the like in the family business, and your father's chairman of the board and so on, and if your husband's involved or brother's involved. Was it different having a completely independent, non-related board?
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, well, you guys ran this big business forever, and okay, like Nancy, let's do this. And you're like, what are bylaws? And so,
No, exactly.
like,
No, and so again, I can still remember like going home from that meeting. The equivalent of Googling. I'm not sure what it was at the time, but I got to figure out what bylaws are.
it was like Netscaping or
Yeah,
something like that,
exactly.
right?
But and I, and again, the boards at that time in a small little organization like that are large, a lot of parents, so you that's an interesting dynamic.
Yep.
But a lot of really dedicated volunteers. But I can still remember sitting at one of my first board meetings, and we spent, and I'm not kidding, I think like an hour and a half talking about what color sequins were going to go on whatever costume. And I knew that was wrong. I knew that wasn't really business that needed to be talked about at a board meeting.
Yep.
So we structured committees, and we put in place kind of the infrastructure that helped us at the time, and we had success. But I knew I loved it because what it allowed me to do is basically run a small business.
Yeah.
Because it allowed me to take the various skill sets that I have and use all of them. I didn't have to just pigeonhole myself in one place. One day I could be fundraising, and another day I could be building relationships with parents and talking to the kids and creating organizational charts and how we're going to do classes. And, so it gave me that opportunity to use a lot of skills, which is, again, why I never left it, because it was really fun.
So then, like in 2005, like how'd you make your transition to where you are now? And
So in '05, I shifted to running the United Way in St. Peter.
that's right.
Yep.
And that was just because I felt like the 5 years I'd given to the ballet that they were doing well. There's a lot to running a parent organization,
Yep.
you know.
That can
There
be
is.
taxing.
And I felt like they're in a good place. And so I went to work for the United Way in St. Peter. Very different and again, it had been a real small United Way at the time, and I thought there's a lot of opportunity here. It was in St. Peter.
Did it feel like coming back home because of Gustavus and the whole?
Well, I live in St. Peter.
Yeah.
And so
did you feel like you were going back? And
yeah, I felt like I can now have an impact on this community that I live in, and also it allowed me to be there when kids aren't driving yet. Again, you're trying to work this around your life.
no, I get it. I mean,
And my kids weren't driving, and they're super active, and I could be there when they got home from school and take them to wherever they needed to be. So it was a lifestyle, and it also challenged me because it was very much a fundraising position.
Yep.
And so I kind of wanted to see how I could do in that.
which is always fun for me to hear because we've had, if you don't know, you don't want to share it now. We have a like specific emphasis on a female leadership series, and we have really intentionally tried to get guests that are female leaders, and all different stages of life. People that are 30 plus, 40, 50, 60, 70, get people at all stages of life, and because what's fun for me, and I think for Matt too, and like tell me to shut up, but we're more progressive modern dads. We're involved in, I do stuff that I don't think that my dad and my grandpa did.
Yeah.
And I think you can say the same, right?
Yeah.
So
That wouldn't surprise me at all. Like my husband did things that my parents wouldn't have
Right.
done because that wasn't expected.
And so, we wanted to showcase and really put some emphasis and not feel like ashamed about doing that. What you did at that point in time in your career was really freaking hard to do. I mean, to have kids that are non-driving and that whole deal and build organizations at the same time, it's not an easy thing to do.
And my husband was a pharmaceutical rep at the time, so he's on the road.
Wow.
Yeah. So he's got a bag
that's
and a
whole
car and he's
different
driving.
dynamic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's,
Yeah.
super helpful when he can be.
Yep.
But, that 3:00 time frame was really difficult to manage. And so, again, the decision was kind of made for, here's something that will challenge me but work,
Yeah.
and again, it allowed me to get to know the community better and make relationships within the community. So I did that for 5 years. And then, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that starting at the ballet on my day 2, I walked in and this woman looks at me and I'm the new executive director, right? And
Right.
this woman looks at me and says, "Here, I need you to do this and this and this." I'm like, "Who is this person?" Well, it was their contract accountant. It was Joan Untied.
Yeah.
So Joan had worked for the ballet, and Joan and I got to be very good partners in that entire effort. And she was very committed to the work that we did. And so then when I went to the United Way, I brought Joan in to do the books for the United Way. Joan has a very high-level nonprofit experience. And then in 2009, there were some individuals in the community that were talking to Joan about they needed an accountant for the foundation. And so they were talking to Joan and about all these various things they wanted her to do. And she said, "Well, I can do the accounting, but this other stuff you're talking about is really for an executive director or something like that." And they said, "Well, do you have any suggestions?" And so Joan actually got me in on the foundation job.
I didn't know you two had that much of a background.
Yes,
I didn't either, which
we
is,
go back a really long
I
time.
love hearing that.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so like if you had to tell our listeners and the 4 people that watch this,
5. We have 5
5
followers now.
probably, what does that mean to have like executive director skill sets. Like, what does that mean? She's like, I can do the numbers, but then there's all this other stuff. So like to be an executive, what does that mean?
So I think largely it's,
Which I don't know that there's a good answer, but I'm just.
yeah, no, it's a really
Yeah.
good question. But, Joan is not going to want to get involved in fundraising or donor
Pod-
relations or
podcasts.
organizing the or
podcasts.
organizing the organization or managing a board or all of those things.
Yep.
So although I've just gotten way more involved in that stuff lately, but at the time, there was a pretty line in the sand about what she felt her skill set was. And again, they I think they hired her for 8 hours a week originally and me for 25 or something.
Yeah.
Because the foundation at that point was a couple $1 million.
That's how the numbers go every time. I mean, it just seems like they're just trying to like go along to get along and like hire somebody for this for bookkeeping and this person to run point on meetings, and then hopefully we get some money and we build some things, and then they can build more after that. But in the beginning, it's like piecemeal. It's like, and like I had no background at all, and then I came here and met you, and you were like, you were the ED, which I have to make an ED joke, and so I apologize. We can cut it out later. But when I heard ED, I thought executive director, obviously.
That's obviously.
Clearly. So I thought ED, Nancy Zallek. Got it. So there you go.
Yeah.
There's my punchline. I got to laugh. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
But you had already
that was
like,
one of the reasons I wanted a new title.
right. Here's our new ED. And she's like, oh, is it new or is it going to happen? We don't know. So, but you were already this really like formal, polished executive for the biggest nonprofit in the area. And I was always fascinated by the story, and I got bits and pieces of it. And so, like when Matt and I were talking about if you would do our podcast, we were thrilled to have you be here because of your background, your history, and your ties to the area. And then, like, set aside the just amazing work you've done with the Mankato Area Foundation. Because I remember when you got there, what size it was and what it is now. And it speaks volumes. So this is my opinion, and you can say, Wade, that's not true or it's wrong, but this is my opinion. It wasn't your ties to the community because you're fifth generation. It's because you're a fantastic executive and you drove that nonprofit corporation. And you have built something that is sustainable because you're really freaking good at it. And that's not like, I'm not trying to pander or like, what I'm saying, but I watched it happen.
That's incredibly kind of you to say that.
But it's true. It's not kind, it's true. It's
Yep.
true and kind, but it wasn't because like, well, she's a community person and she knows people. That's bullshit. You built this thing like you're a true CEO. Like you built this thing to be, it's the biggest nonprofit we have in the community. All things funnel back to you. Not just from like a standpoint of, well, I don't know how to do this. Well, who should we call? And I go, well, let's just call her. I mean, she knows, like she's figured some out. So like, I'm serious.
Well,
Yep.
I've done nonprofits now for 20 years, so
Right.
hopefully I figured
Right.
some. But my just to play off of where we've come from. So when I started, we had an office in the basement of Midtown Square. It was just us down there, and I had Amy Jo Leonardson, who was Minnesota Council Nonprofits, shared my office with us, so I had her to talk to. And but we just realized that over time, we were if we were going to advance our mission, and we needed to kind of get more visible and have maybe a little different space.
And that council is amazing, by the way.
It is.
So
It is.
if anybody Minnesota Council Nonprofits, it's great. If you can sign up for that membership, or if you can pay the dues to get access to their docs and stuff,
the resources they have
it's
are
tremendous. It's worth it.
Incredible.
I mean, is that fair to say?
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's tremendous if you can sign up for it and pay the very nominal, low cost. That Council of Nonprofits for Minnesota is tremendous, and I really mean that. It is freaking awesome. And being a lawyer, they're like, "Do you know nonprofit?" And I'm like, "I can figure it out." And I go to them.
But it's their
Like,
their website in particular.
It's their place.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they are the best at it.
But anyway, so I had a board member at the time, Rod Meyer, who then had a space larger than he needed, and he offered to share his space with us.
Yeah.
And we moved up with Rod, and that was a tremendous move for us
Who's
because
was that? Rod Meyer and Matt
Norland.
Norland, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to go look at kind of art in their place from time to time because they would host artists in their place up on the hill, like by Tav, I'm thinking, give or take.
Yeah, it's on Adams.
Yeah. There was like a jewelry store up there, and so it was Rod and Matt.
Mm-hmm.
And Rod had a very close relationship with Marian Anderson.
Yeah.
And so
Yep,
he would do
that's right.
stuff for Marian up there, and anyway, so we were up there from about 2011 or 12 until 15.
Yeah.
And then at that point, we came up with the concept for shared spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And so we
Yeah.
purchased that building and turned it into a nonprofit center and haven't looked back.
Mm-hmm. So one question, maybe this is asking too much, but so you had mentioned this a little bit, where you're the fifth generation, and you know that you're going to close the store, and how much or how little, and there's a long question here, but did that shake your confidence a little bit in yourself? And now looking through what you've done with the ballet, what you've done with the United Way, and now what you've done with the foundation, is that, I mean, you've obviously proved to yourself, what in the world you're doing, and you're very good at it. So that's just like, to me, I would have a hard time being like, crap, did I screw that up? Or now looking at it, it's like, you know what? It was probably inevitable anyway, and it's nothing that I did wrong. And, you just kind of gain your confidence back. You know what? Look, I do know what I'm doing, and I am good at this. Maybe that's
God,
asking too much. I don't know.
I'm gonna sound like
That's a great question, by the way.
I don't mean to sound like I have this huge ego or something, but it
You don't.
It never really shook my confidence.
Yeah.
It shook my identity.
Okay.
Like, I didn't know what I was going to do next, but we clearly understood the reasons why that wasn't working, and that if we stood on our heads and we weren't going to change it. There was too many forces working against us, and that made, family-owned businesses were just, especially retail, were just, the entire Front Street used to be nothing but family-owned businesses, and we were one of the last ones to go. So, so without sounding, like I said, egotistical, it didn't shake my confidence. I just didn't know what I was going to do next.
Yeah, I think the comments about identity, that resonates with me, because you have to find like the next version of yourself is going to be. Like, could you do anything? Yes, probably, for sure.
Well, right, but
you're like, I always thought I was going to be this, right? It's like your dad's in the mortgage business and does loans and banking, right? And you think, like, I'm going to do that. Or like, my dad, works for Woolworth. And I think, I want to work for Woolworth too. And so once that goes away, you have the chance to reinvent yourself. But there is a loss of identity. And like, how do you do that in real time? Crap, I don't know.
Well, and like I said, it's like, well, who am I if I'm not Brett's?
Right.
And will I have a seat at the table anywhere? Will people because I was on a bunch of committees, and will I still be asked to be a part of that if I'm not, did they ask me because I had talent and good ideas, or did they ask me because I was part of Brett's?
Like, this building was here. No, I felt the same way. Like, when I was in private practice, I worked at Ferris Johnson, Houston, Casey, Koborowski, Abid, being like a private practice lawyer and being on boards and that kind of stuff. When I left to go in-house at Profinium and be a lawyer there at a bank in town, I felt the same way. I was like, do people still think I'm a real lawyer?
Right.
Because I'm not in private practice, and I'm not actively, pursuing cases and suing people and doing deals. And I was like, do I have a spot at any table? Do people give a crap out, like about what I'm doing? So there wasn't, so like, I get it. Not to that level because I'm not,
Right. But no, that's
but
so,
it was like, I don't know. I was like, oh my God, you still live here? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And they're like, what do you do right now? And I was like, well, I've been doing this for 4 years. Oh, I didn't know that,
no, exactly. And luckily, I said I have the two coolest parents in the world, and they were always incredibly involved. I mean, my dad, as being part of, he was a leader of the community. So he's on every kind of board you can imagine, and super active. So I grew up with that example. But also my mother, who never made a wage for what she did, went to Northwestern. She's smarter than,
Of course.
she's just brilliant.
I didn't. I drove by it.
Yeah. And, but she was, she started out again on probably our school stuff. And then that grew into this, and then church, and then it grew into this. Well, pretty soon she's on state board. She's on the NPR board. She's on she's on Gustavus. She's a Gustavus trustee. She's, so she was my example of, you could have an identity without getting a paycheck, and look what, so my volunteers, that 10 years that I decided to volunteer, I saw the self-worth that she got out of that, and she never felt like, she was fortunate in that she didn't have to work outside the home. So this is where she could focus, but she worked. I mean, she worked 30, 40 hours a week many times on that kind of stuff. And so I realized I'm going to try that and see how that works for me. And again, I felt like that helped me build up my skill set, so that when I got back into the working world, I not only had my business experience to draw on, but I had all this other experience that I could tap.
So other than what you just talked about, what was so cool? You talk about, you said this twice now, that you have the coolest parents ever. Tell me a little bit more about why they were so cool, other than the cool things you just talked about.
Well, first of all, they've always had they raised us with you want to try that? Go ahead. Let's do it. What do you need to do? Let's figure it out. It was always this kind of can-do spirit about whatever it was that we wanted to, if we wanted to try a new sport, whether we wanted to learn a new language, whatever it would be. Mark wants to be a doctor. Okay, we're going to figure out how to get him to be a doctor,
Are you sure you want to be a doctor?
Well,
you
exactly.
Can work in there.
Exactly.
With us.
It's like, no, I'm good. I'll deliver babies.
Yeah. And and so there was that part. Then again, super involved, kind and funny and supportive of us in every way you could imagine. And then just these amazing role models. I mean, if you're talking about genuine philanthropists and people who have given back to the community in time, talent, and treasure over and over and over again. So they are genuinely my role model. And my mom was the first. So the foundation started in 1974. She was the first board chair.
Yeah.
So, talk about
that.
something full circle.
Yeah. I didn't know that, actually. I looked that up.
And so
I've heard it, but yeah.
So I grew up in middle school hearing my mom say, well, I got a Mankato Area Foundation meeting. I got a foundation meeting. I'm like, what the heck's a foundation? Exactly.
Sounds boring. It sounds
So can I take a stab here on the and we can cut this later if you don't like it, but I'm just saying.
Go for it.
So Kamala Harris, first female VP in America. Does that mean anything? Did that resonate with you? Does that matter? Is it
100% that
okay.
matters.
Okay, okay, thank you. So, because I think it's effing huge. It's a huge thing, and it matters
because
a ton.
We need role models. We need presidents and CEOs who are women.
Yeah.
We need vice presidents who are women.
I agree.
We need more examples. And
we had the first female referee umpire in the Super Bowl.
At the Super Bowl, I noticed
right?
that. Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know, like in our culture in southern Minnesota, because this is the So Men podcast, if that stuff matters or it hits or lands, right? So like the first board member trustee for this foundation was your mom. This is like 40 plus years ago, and she's a woman, one of the first. This stuff matters. Like these milestones matter. So to see Kamala Harris, I don't care about your politics, if you like her politics or not. But the fact that she's in the role for our country does matter. The fact that we had somebody throwing flags in that big game, which we care about, I don't care about it as much, but I know America does. That was huge. 47-year-old mom of 3 throwing flags in the Super Bowl. That matters to me. Like, I want to see it. Like, my nieces, my nephews, I send them pictures of this stuff. Like, look at what she's doing. And I send it to my nieces, being 39. And they're like, that's cool. I can do that. That stuff matters to me.
Well, and I know how important it is as examples, because I never thought I couldn't do that stuff. It just never occurred to me.
But that's not the norm.
No,
Yeah.
I know.
You know?
That, and that's what I'm saying, is because I was fortunate to grow up with somebody. And first of all, my dad fully supported her. He thought she was brilliant, and
She was, yeah.
deferred to her on,
yeah.
and still does on any number of things. But I watched her be a part of these boards, and I'm not kidding. When they first decided that the Mankato area needed a community foundation, they went out and recruited the who's who of the community. I mean, it
Yeah.
was the business leaders, and the fact that my mom, who was not a business leader, was recruited to be on that board along with Nadine Sugden and some other cool women. I think says a lot, not only about the men who were on the board at the time, but also just about who those women were. And so, like I said, that was what I grew up with. So this knowing what, again, I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't think, oh, look at my mom can do these things, so I can do them. I just never thought about it.
Yep.
It
wasn't a barrier.
It wasn't a
something
barrier.
Like,
I could just do that. And
Yep.
but when you've had that experience, and then you, to your point, Wade,
Yeah.
realize not many people have that same example. We need more of them, and if they aren't in their family, we need them in the community or in the nation, so that because young girls are going to want to do things differently because they've seen Kamala Harris.
Yep.
So-
Absolutely.
And Nancy Zallek and her mom. And,
Really?
the list goes on. So
Yeah.
I'm seriously, so like that matters to me a ton. I don't, I've got a niece Ava, a niece Isla.
You have an Isla?
I do have an Isla.
do?
Yeah, I do.
I never knew that.
And I have a niece that's Carolina. I'll have a niece that's being born in June. And I want them to know that they have strong, supportive male figures in their lives that do not reject any ideas they ever have. And we were let's go, let's do it, let's make it happen for them. And I think that's different because I didn't grow up that way. It was we'll see a president that's a woman, we'll see female football coaches and all these other barriers broken. I think in our lifetime, yours, mine, and yours, we'll see it happen. And I think it does matter. And there'll be movies made about it, and I hope and I believe it happens in our lifetime. And I think if we talk about it, it'll give them the same feeling you had. And I think you were the exception at the time.
I think you're
grew
right.
up.
And back to your original question, Matt, but partly because the dynamic between my mom and dad. So my mom's this very competent, bright woman, and my dad there was never a hierarchy between the two of them. They made decisions together. They were a team, and so that's what we saw. And so my brother grew up. My brothers, but you asked me about Mark. So he grew up watching that dynamic, and likewise, always treated me like I was just a complete, equal to him, and would come to me and ask my opinion, and so did Scott when we were in business together. And but I often think that Mark is good at what he does because he has such a strong respect for women. That
He was the majority of the people he's working around.
You-
are female.
100%.
You'd have to.
Yeah, and so, and I think that just comes through. He is when he is with his patients or his coworkers or the other women within his arena.
Yep.
He fully respects them and has never, played that male dominating role. It's just not his style.
Yeah.
Which is
And-
interesting.
And he has a
because
huge, and to back it up just a second in case he's listening, you never know, right there. But my wife works up there, and your wife works at the hospital, but he has a huge respect for. I mean, I've never heard any nurse get worked up about something that he said or did. I mean,
No,
he's
because he
always been
treats people nicely.
he treats people like people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Which is fun.
Which is cool.
Because he's in this field that, and you're in the opposite field, I think. So your CEO, which is mostly a male-dominated field, Mark is in a spot that is primarily women. Mm-hmm. And so you have to, you have to show up and show out and do your thing, because there has to be many opportunities, for you to have meetings where it's mostly men.
Which is interesting, and which is, I give my board a lot of credit, because at one point they made the decision to change my title from executive director to president and CEO.
It matters.
Because they
right?
acknowledged that
Yeah.
and realized that, if we want to elevate our leadership on the playing field, we need to give her the title of the same people that she's meeting with in the
Exactly.
room. And, again, I've never had a lot of ego around my title. And so I was kind of like, well, that's cool, thanks. But in hindsight, it was the right decision.
Yep.
It does make a difference. And I appreciate the fact that they saw that in me and chose to go that direction.
And I think too, though, it looks at the ego of the person, that's trying to to do that, is you have to put ego aside. Like I was talking to some staff today of mine, and we're looking at hiring another person, and I'm like, I actually would prefer it to be a female. I don't know if I can actually say that and get in trouble for that or whatever.
It's our podcast.
I'm like,
so
I would
fine.
actually prefer that because of these reasons. We went through them, and I don't need to go through it, but I'm like, to me, I'd rather have my personality. I'd rather have the opposite person in that role. In looking at having that, hiring that person, I'd rather have somebody else that has an opposite viewpoint or that's still very competent, but just sees things differently, because I want that compliment. And I think you can have that you don't have to have, ego as to.
Part of your brand's contrarian, though.
Yes.
You put that out there to be contrarian, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think for hiring and building up leadership, I always make the joke that my wife and my sons and I, we don't use separate bathrooms in our home. Mm-hmm. We all use the same toilet. And why is it different outside of our house? We don't really know. Why are there female bathrooms or male bathrooms or alien bathrooms or whatever? And so I think hiring has to go like that. You have to go right person, right chair. And I don't care if if you're female or male or transgender or whatever, you identify with. That doesn't matter. It has to be right person, right chair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
But I think we need more female leadership. And I think that if you are in a specific field, for female leadership, they're going to be highly sought after, I think, in the next decade or two, for folks that are somewhere around the age of 30, 35, and 40, 45. Just look at the numbers, man.
Mm-hmm.
Fortune 500 companies with CEOs that are women, their how they produce, their profitability, their turnover numbers. There's a lot of data that speaks to what's clearly freaking obvious, and just make the right hire, and don't worry about if the guy is over 6 feet tall, if he's white, you know what I mean, and has hair. Nobody gives a shit about that. Make the right hire.
Yeah.
And I think you'll see, hopefully in our lifetime, we'll see a shift where those big companies and nonprofits will have more diversity in leadership for men and women. I think that's the case.
And the interesting thing about the nonprofit world is it's heavily female.
Yeah.
Because it has always been kind of, we can't pay very much because we're a nonprofit, and so it's been kind of that traditional second income, which historically,
Interesting.
it has been
Yeah.
not as well paid.
But that's changing, right?
It is changing.
Okay, thank you.
That is one of the reasons that, I wanted to do shared spaces, not just me, but that is to raise the visibility and the professionalism of the sector.
Yeah.
To realize that we are running small businesses that are critical to this community or to all communities, and that the people in those leadership and that work for them need to be paid decent wages to do the work that they do. That, it's kind of in the olden days, air quotes, that, people kind of felt like, well, if you work for a nonprofit, you're kind of volunteering part of your time because, it's sort of a feel good. You get to feel good for what you do. Well, no, you get to work your ass off,
No, you usually work more, right?
Yeah. And so it's very rewarding work, but it's work people should be compensated fairly for. And I think now,
For sure.
and because we need to attract the best people to this. If we want the sector to be successful, we need to be able to attract the brightest and the best as well.
You need the talent. Yep.
And so we need to we need to figure that out. And I've been doing this 20 years, but even in the 10 years I've been with the foundation, I have seen that progression happen.
It's better, right? We've gotten better at that, and
we're not all the way there yet. We're certainly not there with the smaller groups, but it's getting better.
So here's one of the questions we wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Is, in a big, broad sense, where is philanthropy, nonprofits, like in the bigger, broader, kind of 10,000-foot view,
like Minnesota, the region.
Where are they trending? Are we trending positively? Are we trending negatively? Are you seeing more donors? Are you
during
seeing
the
less
pandemic?
donors?
How's that been?
Explain that a little bit.
Well, so I'd like to talk regionally first.
Sure.
Yeah.
And because you guys who both know me have probably heard me say this, but I can't give you specific numbers, but I know for a fact, because I've done this now for 20 years, but this particular region is about as generous and philanthropic as any area in the state. I go to conferences everywhere in the state, and I sit there and look at my peers who do what I do in other areas and think, oh my God, I am so glad I'm doing that in our community. Because they're constantly asking me, like, we see shared spaces. We have this idea. We want to build this center where nonprofits can collaborate. Okay, we'll help you do that. Oh, we need to do something for seniors. Okay, well we'll do Vine, Children's Museum. When Mankato or this region identifies something that's important to the community, we get behind it and do it.
Minnesota generally is always in the top 5 in the country for giving.
Exactly.
We always finish up 1, 2, 3. We're always in the top 5. And like usually 1.
And I would challenge you that I think we are at the top of the state. Because like I said, I get phone calls from other nonprofits, other people in my position in other community foundations going, how did you pull that off? How did you get people behind the concept of shared spaces? What did you tell them? And
I was just Nancy. I did Nancy things, and we talked to him, and we asked for money.
And I brought Denny Dotson along.
There you go.
No, you bring, but you have, it's a weird thing. Like you have high achievers, which you're a high achiever, and then they have this like tendency to not take credit for their work. Like, I don't know about that. Like, congrats on your award. And you're like, I don't know what an award. Whatever. So the company, the nonprofit corporation, was worth $2 million, and since I got here, now it's worth $200 million. I don't know how that happened. I don't know. Anyway,
that'd be nice.
Who knows? I have no idea. I don't know if I'm here or not. But it goes to speak to that you are doing this thing that is highly skilled, and you can really deliver results like any for-profit company, like nonprofit.
Well, right.
You go, hey, if you do this, I'll deliver this impact in the community.
Right. Exactly. And that's what I love about it, because I will come in the morning and, 1 minute I'm talking about what is our marketing strategy, and another minute I'm talking about what's our fundraising strategy, and then I get to talk to some donor who wants to do something really cool in the community, and then we're pulling together the nonprofits to find out, okay, what are their stresses, where are they at, what do they need, and we get to that. Every 15 minutes it's completely different, but just energizing. I mean, it just, I get, 10 years, I still get excited every day when I come to work. And again, you generally start out with a to-do list. And then, if I got one of those things done by the end of the day, that's amazing. But community foundations just make so much sense. They're such a great tool to elevate the concept of philanthropy and to realize that philanthropy can really make a difference in a community. And we already have that. It's part of our DNA here. So I get to play off of something that was already there, but I get to enhance it. And then we have great examples of how it's worked, and I can use those as examples. So, my biggest job is to get people excited about giving back to this community. And that's what gets, that's what I love.
You've told me, and I was just going to say, you've told me stories about when you get to sit across from somebody and they're telling you about, we've been blessed and we want to give back and how can we do that? And you get to be the one that connects the whole thing.
I know.
It's like, you want to accomplish this. These are the things that we can help you accomplish with that. And they walk out super excited, having given money away.
Right.
And you are excited because now you're growing the foundation, you're benefiting people, you're making an impact on the community, and everybody's winning. You've told me those stories, at least 5 of them, and it's just so fun to watch that happen.
No, and it's being the ultimate dot connector.
I've seen them in the meeting, man. You've been to Twin Rivers. You've been to Educare. I've been on those boards. You've come and it's just it's a good thing. And so I guess for our podcast, and I was thrilled and grateful that you would come and do it. And so because I've seen you do your work, and I know the growth, and I want to get into the numbers and all that kind of stuff. But just all the reports on MAF are available and out there for everybody to see. It's a public thing. Just check the numbers. The growth has been tremendous. It's just been, and the impact has been bigger. So I've seen it and been in your meetings. So I was so thrilled that you would do our podcast, and I
want to finish your question. So you were asking about giving here. So just to kind of put it in perspective. So 2009, we're $2 million, right? And we're giving about $60,000-$70,000 away.
Yeah.
Which is still not an insignificant amount of money.
No,
That's a good chunk, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
But, I still remember Brian Sowers, I'll give him credit. We sat in a meeting one day and he said, Nancy, if you ever got to be 20 million, you'd be giving $1 million away a year. And I remember looking at him going like, 20 million? Are you kidding me? Like, how would we do that?
Well,
and
Brian Sowers is awesome, and he has a good vision too, and he's also a good executive from U.S. Bank. So big shout out to U.S. Bank too.
There you go.
He really does care, and I think that his vision and his ability to make that happen, it's got to be hat off. Like tip of the hat for for him.
So he's early board chair, and we were just kind of examples of where could the foundation go? Let's not think as we were creating infrastructure and committees and boards and let's not think like a $2 million foundation. Let's think like a $20 million foundation, because that's where we want to get to. So we set this big fat hairy audacious goal a while ago. We were going to be 20 million by 2020, because look what we be giving $1 million away. Anyway, we met that goal actually a year too early, and that year we gave $980,000 away, and I was just like, dang, I so wanted to hit that $1 million mark, right. And we don't know until we'd add it up all afterwards, But then last year, the year of the pandemic.
So 2020.
2020, we went from 980,000 to 1.7 million.
Yeah, there you go. So
that's what people did during the pandemic.
Wow.
My phone rang, and they said, we created the Community Response Fund, as you know, and a lot of the funds went into the Community Response Fund. But people in this community, just like I would have expected, as the stock market is tanking, as things are going down, I'm getting phone calls saying, use my fund, take $20,000 out of my fund, take $10,000 out of my fund. Here's this. Just and no strings attached. You figure it out. That's why we created the Community Response Fund, because we felt like we can be that conduit of knowing what's going on in the community. But that's what the region's like. And so actually in 20, giving went up. And in 21, they anticipate that it's going to go up again.
Wow.
Yep.
And it made us a little nervous because we know it was maybe a little falsely inflated in 20 because people were reacting
Yep.
to the pandemic, which is great.
Mm-hmm.
But, all indications are that people are continuing to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's the thing that I've said over and over again, which is, again, I like to get people excited about giving money away. But the other thing is when they do it, you want them to realize how fun it is because then they want to do it some more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a real thing. People give money away. It makes them happy. They see the difference they made. And then pretty soon they're calling me and going,
Yep.
well, what else needs some help? And it's
an endorphin thing.
it is.
Really
It is an endorphin
Yep.
thing. And,
It's contagious.
It is.
lucky me, I get to be right in the middle of that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I get to work with these amazing people that find themselves in a position because they're feeling lucky and fortunate to be in the position that they're in and have chosen to use that good fortune to give back to the community. And so I get to work with them, and then I get to pull in the nonprofits who are just doing this incredible work and be able to say, hey, guess what? This donor wants to help you out by doing this and get to be that dot connector in the middle. So it's just a really, really cool job to have. And I'm not kidding. I just feel so lucky that I get to do it.
And that's our only thing on who we have on here is, and I've told you this, is they have to be interesting. They have to be like they're doing something interesting. And that's why you were one of my first phone calls when we were doing this. And I'm like,
I was like, she'll do it. That'd be awesome.
she'll do it, and she's going to be interesting and engaging. And I'm looking at my watch, and we're like an hour, 40 minutes in already. We're like, holy crap.
And I remember when you said 90 minutes, I was like, I can't talk 90 minutes.
Yes, you can.
I know I can talk 90 minutes, but I didn't
Yeah, for
think.
sure.
Yeah.
No, I don't. So I guess I'll say like the same thing that if you will come back and do it again and tell us what you have going on, we can kind of go over skip past the normal stuff and just get an update on MAF. Just want to say that we have had Nancy Zallek, President and CEO of Mankato Area Foundation. That's mankatoareafoundation.com. And since joining MAF in 2009, Nancy has grown the foundation's assets. And yes, I'm reading, from $2 million to over $22 million in annual granting, from $50,000 to $1.7 million.
Wow.
Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually got a little bit bigger than that now.
It's bigger. So I think she said, well, wait,
There's no ego there.
Yeah, no.
not to brag, but
I didn't say, there's a little competitiveness.
Not to
so-
brag,
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
not to brag a little bit, but she showed up. They're giving away $50,000. Now they're giving away about $2 million. So
Yeah.
she's doing her, she's like doing her thing. And I want to say from our perspective on the podcast, that it might be a different way of serving the community, but we got 5 generations going very strong of Nancy and her family serving our community in any way that they can. If it's retail, department, or nonprofit, you guys are still here, and you're
And there's another
helping us.
Yeah, there's another whole generation. I've got 3
that's-
kids. Mark's got 3 kids, and
on deck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there is actually a 6th generation, and a couple of those are residing locally, so
good.
that will be pretty cool.
That is
So
cool.
we're going to close. Your camera's right there. If you have a shout out or anything you have going on, any family, friends, loved ones you want to talk about, or MAF stuff, that's you. And you let us know.
I think actually we sort of covered a lot of stuff. And the biggest shout out probably, that we haven't touched on, is that one of the things that's made me able to do what I've done. I mean, you're giving me a lot of credit. I couldn't do this without the volunteer. I mean, I've got a very dedicated board. I've got a number of committees. Matt sits on one of them.
Yep.
And all of that infrastructure and all of that volunteerism. And, we've been really lucky in that people like the foundation. They enjoy volunteering for the foundation. And
Same.
so we get this broad set of skill sets around the table. So I know I've got certain skills and I'm good at certain things, but I love the fact that I can pick up the phone and call an attorney or call a CPA and say, hey, what can I do about this? And they so generously donate their time and talent to us. That's really, again, I think it's part of what I do as a president and CEO is making sure that all of those pieces work. But I certainly couldn't do this without those folks. And then again, I would be entirely remiss without mentioning my staff, who is incredible, and just also dedicated. Again, they come to work every day because they care about what we do, and everybody works just amazingly hard and is committed to this organization. But it's an easy thing to be committed to because you get to see the results so easily.
And it's easy to get excited when you're working with people that have passion around stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's so much easier. So yeah. Well, I will say thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
And I've had a ton of fun.
Me
This
too.
was like one of my we didn't have a
I look
podcast
forward to
last
this
week
for a long
because
time.
I was on vacation. So we've had 2 weeks of like just thinking time about Nancy's coming on. We've talked about it. And so we've been super excited to have you on. And like Wade said,
The biggest downside is I had to talk the whole time, so I didn't get to drink my wine.
well,
but you did.
once we cut this, we're gonna probably finish the rest of that.
No problem. But
Well, thank you very much for coming on, and we hopefully at some point we can get you back on and you'll talk a little bit more about the foundation, how things are going.
You bet.
Thank you.
Nancy.